Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another OPP Uniform Recruitment Ask Me Anything session. I'm Constable Real Levac. I am currently coming to you from the Ottawa Detachment in East Region. I'm joined today by Constable Marisol Primo, who's also here in East Region. And just before we get started, I'll give you a little bit of a lowdown about myself. I have 20 years completed with the OPP, and I've been with Uniform Recruitment for 5 years now. I started in a few other different detachments, but I've done different roles like court officer, media officer, liaison officer with auxiliary unit, rode the motorcycle, radar, LiDAR instructor, breathalyzer technician. A lot of different roles you can do within a detachment that helps sometimes just change things around a little bit. So I'll let you, Marisol, if you want to introduce yourself and give us a quick little spiel on you do. And we have some great big announcements and news before we get started with questions today.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marisol Primo, and I've been with the OPP now for 20 years. And much like my colleague was saying, I started out working the front line in Petawawa, doing general patrol duties, did that for a number of years before I transferred to Renfrew Detachment. And then I started to specialize as well in different areas. I was a crisis negotiator, which is an extra duty where we get called out when we're needed. I was a peer support and critical incident stress team member. I was also a member of the provincial liaison team where we deal with a lot of major disputes and protest events. And more recently now I find myself in uniform recruiting and talking to you all. So great to see you all here, and hopefully we'll be able to answer a lot of your questions today. But like we said, we've got some announcements.
Some big announcements. You might have heard already that the Ontario Police College has now dropped the tuition for recruits coming to training. So it was just over $15,000. And as of January 1st of this year, retroactively, the Ontario government has decided to remove that tuition, which for some might be a barrier in thinking of applying to policing in Ontario, and particularly here today with the OPP with us. So that is great news that we received about the removal of the tuition. It has gone up through the years as things gone by, but it has now been erased, which is excellent news. Also, next week is Police Week. And in support of Police Week, Uniform Recruitment will be holding several events across the province. I believe some may be virtual, many will be in person. If you're interested in attending one of these events, there are some across the province. You can find the events at opp.ca/events. And then you can link. You have to register probably for most of these events. So please, if you're interested, go in, grab a spot. If you don't think you can make it, don't grab a spot just thinking kind of sort of, because you're taking it away from somebody else. So make sure you can attend if you're going to sign up for one of these events so you don't take it away from somebody. And I'll be at the Eastern Region headquarters on Tuesday at noon. And we have one of our East Region ERT members that he's going to come and speak to us about the ERT program and about the drone program that he works with within ERT. And I will have obviously my info session as well. Marisol, what are you going to be doing on Tuesday?
So on Tuesday, I'll be in Petawawa at the Civic Center in the evening from 4 to 7. And in addition to myself, there will be a few of our ERT members there to do demonstrations and speak to people. Some of our forensic identification services members and our scenes of crime officers as well. And then we'll have some members from the local detachment and a few new recruits, fairly new recruits with about a year on the job, so that you can get a good sense of what their experience have been like so far, and get a sense of what it was like going through the process so recently, and talk to some of the local officers about their careers and their experiences too. And that's a drop-in. You don't have to sign up for that one. So hopefully after school or after work, you can stop by and say hi.
And also, we have reopened applications to the REACH program. And the REACH program is designed to help candidates, or future candidates, I should say, prepare themselves for the process. You do have to apply. There is a bit of a screening from our end. It's not open to every single person that wants to be in. So you have to be somewhat competitive, but we're not looking for fully application ready candidates. That we're not looking for that level of competitiveness, but it's to help you to get to that level. The applications close on May 26th. So you have another couple weeks to decide. And if you go to the opp.ca/reach this time, you will find the information on the REACH program, what's required to apply. And don't forget the date, it does close on May 26th. Before we get into any questions, Marisol, do you have anything else? I'm not sure I got anything else off the top of my head.
No, I think that's it. Another one, I just saw a quick question here about the auxiliary program. And since we've been kind of telling you where you can go to find certain things like our events and our REACH program, the same can be said for the auxiliary. If you go to opp.ca/auxiliary, you'll see there all of the minimum requirements to apply to the auxiliary program and what the application process is like. It's still quite competitive and a lengthy process as well, but certainly it's a great way to get your foot in the door with the OPP and get a sense of what it's like to ride along with OPP officers and get involved in the community as an auxiliary officer.
And as a past liaison officer of the auxiliary, it's an excellent program. You really get to do, like Constable Primo said, about hands-on experience on the road. You also do community events. But I want you to be aware, though, that it's not actually an automatic, if you want to apply to be a constable, that it's just kind of a step in. You do have to go through the hiring process like everybody else. But you have the advantage of knowing what the job is and knowing what's expected of you and how to prepare yourself and get a lot of different experiences. And we as an organization also get to know you as a potential candidate, potential recruiting police officer. So it's really, really good that way for that program. What is something everyone should consider before deciding on a career in policing? Wow, that's an open and heavy question. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing is to be aware and knowledgeable of what you're getting into. So I have a term that I kind of made up. It's called Hollywood policing. I do speak to people now and then, and some people out there want to get into policing because of things they see in the cinemas or on television, and that's not what policing actually is. So being able to gather some experiences, whether education or in community, the auxiliary program, things like that, even reading about policing itself, some real experiences of officers, that'll help you give you an idea. I think that's the biggest thing, to make sure that you actually know what you're getting into. Preparing yourself, go on our website and get all that information that you need. The OPP also has 2 programs, or challenges they're called. There's the OPP Be the Bridge Challenge and Inclusion and Insight. So the Be the Bridge is a Indigenous geared focus challenge, and the other one is a diversity focus. And you do 10 out of 30 I'll say assignments, kind of shorter assignments, and then you can submit your application to Uniform Recruitment, and then you get a certificate that you've completed that program from there. So it gets you to learn a little bit more about your community, about the organization, and how the things that we're looking for and what we want our members to represent the organization, so that when you do look on our website and you found our values and our mission statement, that you reflect that as well, as we want to reflect the organization in a certain image, and that you have that image as well. So something to consider is that the first thing that came to my mind is making sure that you're aware of what you're getting into.
And if I could add to that too, I think, for everyone comes into this career at different stages of their lives. And so for some people, they already have family. So of course you need to consider how this job might impact your family, because you're working shift work. So you're working days, you're working nights, you're working through holidays and family events, that sort of thing. So it certainly does impact your family as well. So you really need to have their support too, for this to be an easier transition for you. There's a question here. If you're in the application process and you're competitive and moving through our applications phases, but there's no room in an upcoming class, would you be considered for the next class? And yes, so quite often when someone applies, they think that based upon the date, they might be considered for the next upcoming class, but that may not be the case. We can never say for sure which class an individual is being considered for, just because certain timelines, it might take longer to process someone's application. Maybe the background stage takes a bit longer, whatever the case may be. So certainly, we would consider someone for the next upcoming class if they're competitive and still active in our process.
And you've touched a bit on the other question here. It says they submit in June. Do they qualify for September if everything goes well? I always tell people to make sure that and might not be exactly where you were headed with your question, but apply when you're ready and you're competitive. Don't apply for a specific date, because depending what happens with the process, sometimes things can take a little bit longer. You just might not reach that next class, and maybe something would be held over or deferred to the following class as well. So, if you apply in June, you could potentially go through the process in September. It takes 3 to 6 months to run people through the process. So June can get a little bit tight from our end to process everything. We do have like an internal cutoff date where we just can't deal with filling in the next class without having more time. So we just work on the next class and the next class from there as it flows and as we get people come in. So you just apply when you're ready, and the offer will come when the process is done and the next class is. So try not to think too much of when exactly you're looking for and go from there. A quick question, and somebody's saying that the application format looks for date, month, year, but Adobe changes it to day, month, year. If Adobe changes the way the date, that's fine. Okay, just if the computer changes it from what exactly we're asking, that's okay. Just go with it.
And a few questions here regarding education. So I'll see if I can maybe answer them all at once. So in terms of minimum requirements to apply, you have to have your grade 12 diploma, your Ontario Secondary School diploma, and that's a minimum requirement. And then certainly any other continuous learning or education academics are an asset. So that doesn't necessarily have to be some kind of formal university or college setting. It could be some online courses. In many cases, we have individuals who are in the military, and so they acquire a lot of transferable skills and experience through their military training. We also have individuals who are in skilled trades, and so they've spent a lot of time apprenticing, and so they have a supervisor who is able to speak about their ability to learn in a lot of detail. So some of it can be on the job learning, where an employer or a colleague is able to speak to your ability to apply your skill, your knowledge and your skills in a hands-on way. But certainly we do like to see that striving for continuous learning. And these days we're so fortunate with all of the online courses that are available, and a lot of it is free. So you can do some online learning that's related to policing. It might be related to mental health, because that's a large part of policing. It might be related to, as PC Levac was saying, like our Be the Bridge training and inclusion insights, where you're learning about other populations and other people, because again, we want that diversity to be reflected in our workforce. So grade 12 is the minimum requirement. Anything else on top of that is certainly viewed as an asset, and there are many ways that you can acquire that continuous learning and post-secondary education.
Okay. So somebody's has a question related to 6 preferred postings and if they're not available at the time. So I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about those 6 preferred postings. So should you apply and get invited to an interview, you will be asked to submit your 6 preferred postings of where you would like to go. We ask that you make an educated decision on those 6, because 87% of candidates get one of their 6 preferred postings. So we try really hard to meet that ask or those selections. We do try to work around different family needs or school needs, custody issues, depending on family situations. So we try to work with that. If you put in northern duration postings, those are good. You might have a good chance of getting that. However, it will not make you more competitive. Okay, keep in mind. So if you put 6 duration postings, it won't make you more competitive than somebody else putting 6 East Region detachment postings. Okay, there's probably a good chance that you'll find something up north. So make sure it's somewhere you want to go. However, just talk to your family. If you have kids, spouse, anything like that, make sure that everybody that has something to say is aware of those choices and where you would like to go. Now, in saying that, 87% do get one of their 6 preferred postings. We do have to look at the needs of the organization at the time we offer of employment, and not every detachment has an opening at those times. So what happens is that if you're offered a position, it's part of the whole offer. You don't necessarily have to take it. You can be deferred to the next class. It doesn't guarantee that detachment that you're holding out for will be available the next class, but there might be something that can work with you and your situation a little bit better. So you can't really select. I guess you can probably ask. I'm not the one that looks after that. You may ask if there's any other detachment areas. I'm not sure how that works, because there's, like right now we're trying to fill classes of 135. So it's not an easy thing just to kind of move candidates around to try to fit classes. So you can potentially just be deferred to the next class. So just make sure that you do the best you can and put somewhere you want to go. And if it happens to be available, you can make the decision from there.
Question regarding completing the OACP. Even though the OACP is not a requirement for the OPP in our application process, certainly if you choose to complete it, then do include it with your application, and then we can see that you have passed the testing. Just know that it's most of it is only good for a year. So after that time, if you include it, we can see that you were able to pass at that moment in time. But if it's expired, then we can't really use it at that stage.
So somebody's asking an interesting question. So recommended sources to prepare for my interview. So I don't have necessarily sources I can point you to, but for an interview, so confidence is the first thing that came into my mind. Okay. So how to be confident? First off, I'll give you an example. When I started, or when I was preparing and applying, I wrote down a whole bunch of questions that I thought I would be asked. And now with the internet, you can go out and find out a whole bunch of type of interview questions that might be asked. And I wrote answers for them. But what I did is I practiced speaking them out loud, because knowing the information in your head and being able to speak it properly is different, because sometimes you stumble on your words till you get that flow of your answers. And that shows a little bit of confidence. All right. The other thing too is to make sure that you know your file, your application, your portfolio, whatever you want to call it. Okay. Sorry, something just popped up and it threw me off track for a sec. So make sure you're aware of the application. I have a past colleague who said the smartest person in the room at the interview is the candidate, because it's a local focus interview. The interviews, the questions are about you. So you should know you. So if you've been involved in any incidents that you want to bring up to discuss at the interview, your school, your grades, things you've been involved in, about your work, tickets, collisions, all that, you should know that. You shouldn't be stumbling and humbling and thinking, where did that happen? I was thinking I was driving here, I was dating so-and-so, and I think that's in and about that time that this collision occurred. Okay. That doesn't show confidence. It doesn't show preparedness. Okay. So make sure that you know everything about you that you want to present that day. It is an interview. We're probably going to stump you with a few questions. That's normal. Okay. But for the most part, things should flow. You should know the answers to the questions and go from there. And those are some of the things that we're looking for. Okay, so that's kind of how to prepare yourself. But a big thing is practicing your answers.
And we had a question about the REACH program since we touched on that earlier. And so the question was, is it going to be in person or virtual? So the great thing about this is that it will be virtual. So it doesn't mean that you have to take time out of school or work, which is great. A lot of it will be done virtually, or all of it will be. And so essentially, when you complete the the package and send it in, it will be screened. At that point, we will determine who is most suited to the REACH program and make those selections from there. And then at that point, the people who have been successfully accepted into the program will be contacted, and then it will begin with some mentoring. Essentially, it's a mentoring program that is designed to help individuals who are close to being ready to apply, but maybe not quite there yet. The program is really designed to mentor you and get you to that stage where you have the confidence and the competitiveness to apply. In terms of how many people we're accepting, I'm not sure at this point. We may get an answer during this presentation. I've asked, so we'll see.
Okay. We have a military member asking about any specific courses that would help. As a military member, I think most of the courses that you have will probably help. The leadership training, the firearms training, the tactical training that you guys have, or all those members have, that is excellent transferable skills. It's above and beyond what a lot of people out there get or can find. So being able to show that you've learned and developed those skills and that you can potentially use them on this job, that's excellent. Just have your course reports as part of your application so we can see what those courses are. Ideally, if there's any type of grades or pass percentages for some of those courses, if you can find that and tack it on, that helps as well. It helps a little bit with the ability to learn, because it is 75% to pass at the Ontario Police College in each individual courses. So if you can provide any of that information, that's an added bonus.
A few questions here around fitness. So I'll try and cover those off. So there was a question regarding the shuttle run, the 20-meter shuttle run, and whether we stop at level 7. So what we want to see with our candidates is what your very best is. So certainly level 7 is the minimum requirement if you're applying to the OPP. What happens is when you send us your application package, immediately what will happen is you will receive an email with instructions in terms of how to record yourself doing the 20-meter shuttle run. And that will have to show that you're able to reach at least a level 7 in order to be continued in our process and screen your application. Having said that, if you're able to do more than level 7, by all means, show us that. If you're able to do better than level 7, it means you're more competitive fitness-wise than someone else who struggles just to reach level 7. So always show us your best. And the same comes to the fitness logs. There was a question around that. And so, yes, we do want to see you completing the logs for the entire week. So there are logs Monday to Sunday, and we want to see what you're doing every day. And so if that means that a certain day is a rest day, then certainly indicate that. But we want to know essentially what you're doing in terms of strength training on a weekly basis and cardio training on a weekly basis. If you've looked at those logs, we also want to see your sleep, your stress management, as much detail as possible on a daily basis. And then I'm just looking, so flexion, yeah, a lot of people for the pin test aren't sure in terms of how to measure for the sit and reach. So essentially, the best way to do that is to sit at the bottom of some stairs, place your feet against the very bottom step, And then from there, as you hinge forward, if you can reach your toes with your fingertips, that's considered 26 centimeters. So anything beyond your toes, you're adding on to the 26 centimeters. So essentially you need a ruler or a measuring tape that will measure past your toes. So hopefully that helps you a little bit in terms of doing that measurement.
And you might not have noticed, Marisol, but it just popped up. You and I had put together some videos regarding the pin testing, and they will be out next week.
Okay.
I just saw that pop out, and
yes, pfpo.org is where you can go to get the scoring matrix for the fitness pin. So for anyone who doesn't know, the fitness pin is made up of 4 components. There's a 2.4 kilometer outdoor run, and I do stress outdoor. We don't want people running on treadmills. So there's a 2.4 kilometer outdoor run. There are push-ups. There is the sit and reach or the flexion, and core endurance. And so if you go to pfpo.org, it will tell you what your final score is based upon your age and your gender. So you add up all 4 of those components out of 100 to get your final score, and 75% is considered the minimum requirement or a pass. But again, anything be above 75% just makes you that much more competitive than someone who is only at 75% or below.
All right. So somebody's asking about the best way to prepare for Sigma. There are different entities out there. The Sigma has some language questions and some math stuff. There's different places you can look about preparing yourself for police examinations. I don't know the websites. I don't want to point you in one place or the other, because if it doesn't quite prepare you, I don't want to be the one to saying that you sent me to the wrong place. It's just kind of language and math. Give you an idea, it's a 35-minute time test, and you do as many questions as you can, and then pencils down at 35 minutes and assess from there. But the grading is not a strict reach a certain point, pass, fail. It's a range of that they look at within successful candidates. So, but the best way to prepare, just check online to see what kind of police testing you can find, but it's geared towards language and math.
Question, just scrolling through some of the earlier ones here. So someone was asking about volunteering and how long would we recommend volunteering before applying. And so really volunteering, we like to see volunteering and community involvement, because most people, one of the reasons they want to become a police officer is to help people or to help their community. And really, how do you know that that's something that you actually enjoy and excel at unless you've been doing it? And how do we know that that's something that you excel at unless you've been doing it? So having that community involvement really is an asset, but also it tends to make people more competitive sometimes in other areas. So what I mean by that, for example, perhaps through your employment and your schooling, maybe you're a little weak in a certain area. It might be in terms of leadership, for example, or diversity, exposure to diversity, or communication skills. It could be really any of the areas of assessment that we talk about on our website and social media. And so quite often, if you choose certain volunteer opportunities, you might develop yourself in those areas while contributing to your community, which is a great thing. But you might acquire those communication skills or leadership skills because you are mentoring someone, or communication skills because perhaps you're working on a crisis line or something to that effect. So we really do like to see it. In terms of how long you should be doing it, Essentially, we would like to see someone be involved on a consistent basis over a period of time versus you've applied in June, and so you started volunteering a month before that. But certainly it's never too late, and we like to see some volunteering, and it doesn't have to be a part-time job. It might just really be a couple hours a month that you are able to commit to on top of school and work and having a family. We get it that people are busy.
Somebody's asking if they don't pass the vision requirements, can they get corrective eye surgery, and particularly within the process? Anytime you don't meet the requirements, whether it's vision, that could be corrected, fitness, that you might need more time on, I suggest waiting till you're competitive. Okay, the candidates that get through are competitive in most of the areas, if not all of them. So you want to make sure you're bringing in your best self to this process. With the corrective surgery, there is the time for the surgery itself, and then you have to have 2 checkups. I think they're 6 weeks apart, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on the time frame. So it just delays things in the process. If you know you don't meet the requirements, it's 20/20 corrected, 20/40 uncorrected, and there's a color blindness test. But for the actual vision that you can get corrective surgery, I would get that ahead. Make sure that everything is good, you're cleared, you're good to go, and then you can apply from there. And you don't have any hiccups or hurdles to deal with within the process, and you can just run through the process as you get through the different stages. Same thing with fitness. If you're not quite meeting standards, don't apply yet. You're not going to be allowed to proceed through the process if you don't meet the standards. So just make sure that you're competitive best when you apply. Try to eliminate any known entities that might delay or thinking you might get a deferral. Why go through that from that stage? Make sure that you're competitive and you're at your best. That's probably the best message I can send to you.
And a question here regarding opportunities or progression for your career within the OPP. So certainly as a new recruit, we're all hired to work the front line as uniformed police officers. So when you start out and when you apply, that is what you're applying to become, as a frontline police officer doing general law enforcement duties. And so there's a huge learning curve for the first few years of your career. Just applying everything that you learn in theory in classroom at the Ontario Police College and the OPP Academy, and then applying that in the real world. There's a huge learning curve, and most officers will tell you it's a number of years before you feel like you've really been introduced to everything to the point where you feel like, although there's always something different, you feel proficient. And so generally you can expect for the first 5 or so years that's what you're going to be doing. You might take on some extra duties at detachment. There are some specialized duties like scenes of crime officer, for example, or breath tech, something like that, where you might be able to, depending on where you are, take on some extra duties. But then branching on to specialty units like, for example, the crime unit, that sort of thing, that typically comes later in your career. And it is very competitive. So it's a small number of specialized positions for a lot of officers who are potentially interested. So it is competitive. So that's just something to keep in mind, that the opportunities are there, but you are hired to work the road, and it is a great career, and you learn a lot. So it's great to take that opportunity on the road to make you more competitive should you decide to specialize or do something else down the road in your career.
Okay. I've got a couple here. I'll address. They're a little bit quicker. Hand, neck tattoos, policy around that. So you can have tattoos that are shown or that can be seen, as long as they don't have anything vulgar, discriminatory, sexist, or anything like that. If they're just regular tattoos without any of those issues, then that works from there. Somebody's asking, with 4 years of driving experience as a truck driver, does it make you competitive in some cases? So in the driving section of that area assessment, yes, it could potentially make you more competitive, especially if you're not involved in collisions and tickets during that time as a truck driver. However, we always assess all the areas of assessment. So even though you might be highly competitive in one area of assessment, we look at the whole package, your whole portfolio, your whole application. So try to make yourself as competitive as you can in all areas and not just one and have too many missing things elsewhere, because that in its entirety will make you less competitive, even though you have one highlighted area.
Question around how do you increase your competitiveness, and including when you're already in the process? So someone here is already in the process, and so it's a great question, because really you should never stop building upon your skills and making yourself more competitive through the process. So you never want to get to the point where you feel comfortable, like it's a done deal now, and so I can just sit back and wait for the job offer. So I would recommend reviewing our areas of assessment. If you've been on our website or our social media, you'll be familiar with that pie chart. And there are the 10 areas of assessment that we talk about. And so I would suggest looking at those and determining maybe where you have some opportunities for growth and focusing on that. There might be some opportunities in terms of continuous learning related to police-related field, where you could do some online courses or training. Certainly volunteering, anything in terms of watching some of our information sessions. You might get some good tips. Still focusing on your fitness and making sure that you're maintaining your fitness, because you get tested regularly throughout our process. And then once you get to the academy and the Ontario Police College. So really, it's just a matter of continuously assessing yourself and looking at where you've got opportunities to keep building on yourself.
So somebody has a question that's right up my alley. Is experience of federal correctional officer beneficial to having a successful application? I used to work in federal corrections before I got on with the OPP. I was stationed at Kingston Penitentiary when it was still a penitentiary and not a museum. So that's how long I've been on. So yes, it is beneficial. It does make you more competitive. You have some transferable, directly related skills from dealing with certain members of our society that you're going to deal with in policing as well. So absolutely, it's transferable, or it's beneficial to your application. But again, that might make you more competitive in employment, but we do look at the entire packages, like I mentioned briefly a little bit earlier. I think you touched on this. I might be repeating a little bit. Somebody says, why not on treadmill? So you got to train the way you're going to be evaluated. Everybody's going to run outside, whether you're in the summer class or you're in the January class, you will be running outside. So train the way you're going to be evaluated. Just keep in mind, we understand if it's snowstorm day, ice storm day, don't go out and get hurt. If you have the odd sporadic treadmill run, that's okay, but don't make it your main way of running.
Yeah, and the other thing, when I was touching on fitness, there was a question on the core endurance that I don't think I mentioned. So a lot of people wonder whether they can substitute the plank for the hover that we show you on the fitness section, and no, because it's the same answer. Really, is that you want to be training the same way that you're going to be assessed. And when you're assessed by the appraisers for the pin, we don't have you doing the plank. So you do need that buddy who's going to sit on your legs and kind of weigh you down as you hover off of a table or whatever object that you're using. But you really do want to train the way you're going to be assessed, because many people find the core endurance that we test on more challenging. So you want to be ready for that.
Okay. Somebody's asking a question about process. What's after the psychological assessment? So this is where sometimes things start getting a little bit quiet from a candidate's point of view, not necessarily from our end. But the background stage encompasses the background investigation, psychological assessment, medical assessment that you have to get done. And there's other checks that we do, and they're not exactly in that order. They could be done in different order for different candidates. That's normal, just based on the availability of psych sessions coming up or a background investigator being available for a new file. After the assessment, depending, most of the psychological assessment is done virtually. However, the Sigma is the one component that we do not have a virtual component to, so that you have to come in person to do. And after that, there's a few things. You might have to get your fingerprints, send in some measurements, and that's where things get kind of quiet from your end. You'll continue doing your fitness logs, send them in every month. And then, but then there's other checks and balances and other reports that we do before the next class. And depending how far the next class away is, there might be a little bit of quiet time from us. We haven't forgotten about you. If you're in those late stages of the application, we know you're there. You do get a reach out by one of the recruiters at one point late in the stages. You'll get asked to do another shuttle run video at the late stages as well. But things do get quiet because there's more things for us to do than you to do. You're kind of loaded at the beginning of a lot of things to do, and then we're kind of, although we do things throughout, we are a little bit loaded at the end. And depending when the class is, things do kind of quiet. But from psych, just do your fitness logs. There is a psych interview as well. That's part of the process that gets scheduled as well. So you're getting near, if you're finish your psych assessment, you're getting near what you have to do new. You just keep up with what you're doing and keep in contact with your coordinator on what needs to be done from there.
I just wanted to go back to one that was asked earlier, and I don't think we answered. So if you're in another province, and specifically here, someone in the military, but it doesn't matter what you're doing or where you are, if you're in another province and in this case, moving back to Ontario in June, should you wait until you're back in Ontario to apply, or could you apply now? And certainly you could apply now. The process does take some time. And as PC Levac said at the beginning, a lot of it is front loaded on the candidate, and a lot of it is done virtually. So at that stage, certainly if you're thinking of moving back to Ontario in a few months, you could apply now, and your application would work through the various stages of our process.
Okay. Can you have tunes in the cruiser? Yes, there are radios in the cruiser, so you can listen to the radio. That's not a problem. And I think we kind of covered if all entry-level positions require fitness tests and driving license. Yes, it's part of the minimum requirements that we talked about a little bit earlier. So minimum your G license, and we talked about the shuttle run as well.
In
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's what I was saying. Go ahead.
Okay. So there's some questions in terms of how many applicants do we accept. So we have 3 recruit classes a year, and that's it coincides with when the Ontario Police College runs. And so there is a class in January, a class in April, and a class in September. And right now, for the time being, we have roughly 135 seats in each of those 3 classes. So that's what we look to fill with the most competitive candidates. So certainly we have more applicants than we do seats. And so that is why we tell people to apply when you know that you're at your most competitive, so that you can be a serious contender for one of those spots.
So to follow up, there's a question on following up where I mentioned that things get kind of quiet. If somebody is not selected at any point in the process, if we deem that you're not going to continue in the process, we do let you know. We never just let people hang. Okay. You won't just all of a sudden stop hearing from us. You would get a letter saying that you're no longer in the process. And at that point, and any stage that you get declined from the process, you have to wait a year before you can reapply. That year is designed for you to reassess, kind of debrief yourself, and have a look at where you can make yourself more competitive. And you can look at that through either more information sessions, more of these sessions, and just basically be honest with yourself and see, especially if you've been through the interview particularly, and see what kind of things that you might have struggled with in the interview. Maybe those are the things that you can work on. So yes, we do notify candidates, successful or not, at any stage. Candidates do get notified. Okay. You've answered that one. There was a quick one here. For jobs or community service on the application, what should I put as my end date if I'm still currently involved? Just write present or current. and that'll be fine. You can fill that in that way there, and then we'll know that it's still ongoing.
I'm just scrolling through here to see if there's anything we've forgotten,
Maybe
but
if you can find one more. And somebody's asking here something here a little bit. What kind of progression or different things in the way of specialty units? So there's a vast number of different things you can get into, whether it's promotional and supervisory type management roles, or if it's specialty units in a way of investigative or ERT and SAVE unit and all these different things that we have out there. There's a lot. The thing to keep in mind is that when you're at a detachment, you're there for minimum 3 years. Unless it's a duration, you follow that term that you're there for. And it's 3 years before you can do lateral transfers and before you can apply to these different positions. You have to apply to them. It's not an automatic, I want to go there, so I'll just kind of wait my turn to get in. It's a competitive process. It's a competency-based process, and you're competing potentially against members anywhere in the province, and members that might have 10, 15, 20, 25 years. Like I said, I've been in a unit. I was 22 years on the job when I got into this unit. So there's a lot of members out there competing for these positions, but you can branch off into a number of different things. And if you look through our information sessions and stuff, we talk about and list some of those as well. Look through our website, you'll find out a lot of those things. But it can be management, supervisory, investigative, specialty units. If you like the outdoors, want to do snowmobile, ATV vessels, like the SAVE unit would be great for that. There's IDENT, which is like the forensic side of things, and so many different, there's tactical side of stuff too as well. So there's a lot of different places you can find your way throughout the organization throughout a 30-year career. So I'm going to wrap up real quick. Great news. No more tuition at OPC. Police Week next week. Please check out our events on opp.ca/events. The REACH program applications are being accepted at this time. opp.ca/reach for that one. And applications are open and being accepted until the 26th of May. So please check out our website. We have a lot of information on our website. There's frequently asked questions on there that'll answer a lot of things for you. In that document, there's also a link to the medical and vision and hearing requirements. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. There are videos on YouTube. I know you've all checked in from different places out there. Information sessions. Don't forget your fitness logs. I mean, there's so much out there for you to do, but so much out there for you to read and prepare yourself. Other than that, thank you everybody for tuning in. And until next time.
Thanks, everyone.